Welcome to my humble little office. My name is R. Keith Andrews. I am a spiritual guide and paranormal adept. Today it's about the races of the worlds. And in this case, we're going to introduce you to a very long-time favorite of planet Earth, the Nords. Now, the Nords have been around for centuries. And to start with, let's realize something here. Pardon the artwork. Sorry, it just works that way. Okay, standard saucer, no bubble on top. You will find that these are very similar, if not identical in many cases, to the grays. The reason for that is very simple. They are in close connection with the grays. Now, before we get to that, let's go to the original part. The Nords themselves, when we talk about them having been around here for centuries, if you go back in Terran mythology, and you start looking at the Norse gods, okay, at the Viking gods, the Nordic gods. Well, simply put, that was the Nords. The reason we refer to them as Nords is because of the similarity in appearance. They were usually taller than your larger Vikings, still very combat oriented. Okay, and they absolutely commanded people's attention. Okay, as we know, the North were very, very physically adept. They put a lot of their value. We're told they put a lot of their value in their combat ability. The funny part about the Nord race, though, is they are much more interested in the creative side of it. Yes, they were very good at combat, and that stood out like there was no tomorrow. Okay, they came here originally. Now we're going to show you this again. Okay, and again, it's a terrible drawing, and one day I will sort that out, but not yet. The Nords themselves came from the far side of the Pleiadian star system. Came through the Pleiadian star system. They did connect with both the Pleiadians and the Greys, and they have worked out a very functional interaction with the Greys, which is why on many of the Grey ships you'll find a couple of Nords. The Nords, contrary to popular belief, they're actually not trying to run things, but they have this air about them that draws people's attention. Okay, and of course, way back when people were still running around on horseback, you show up in a saucer, and frankly, it's going to get people's attention. Okay, if you yourself were to take a Bic lighter, we'll do that this way. This is what I get for being in my office. If you take a Bic lighter, standard lighter, and all you do is you conceal it in your hand, and you pop it like this, and you just go like this, and you don't show people the lighter, all of a sudden, if you're in the Congo, for instance, you're a god. You go to people in a community that is less technologically advanced than you, and you're going to get their attention. Well, the Nords were very much like that. Okay, because they had this air about them that they walked into the place and they acted as though they owned it. They belonged there. And the few people that did confront them tried the old route of, well, we'll do the normal might is right thing, only to find out that the smallest of the Nords made the strongest of the Vikings seem weak. Needless to say, they gained this position of essentially they were looked at as gods because of their capacity to heal. In other words, their ability with natural herbs and other concoctions to heal the sick. They gained a place of reverence in the Viking communities. Now, the Nords themselves, we hear that the Nordic gods lived on that the ancient Greek gods and Norse gods lived on Mount Olympus. I might have that a little backwards. It might have been the Roman gods, but you get the idea. Okay, like we've said many times, we do not research. Okay, the Nords do live on their capital city sits on Mount Olympus. The only thing is, Mount Olympus isn't and never was on Earth. Hence why they always pointed to the stars and went, the gods live on, Mount Olympus up there. Well, you get into a starship and you leave. Where are you going to go? Okay, so the Nords came here and stuck around. And of course, they did, in all fairness, they did like the idea of, people looking up to them and going, oh, you're so special. Sad to say, the Nords really do have a serious ego. So, of course, if somebody's going to say, hey, you're a god and we'll give you everything you ask for without you having to fight for it, well, understanding that the Nords did not actually want to fight, when people started giving them support, as in, we're making an offering, here's some food, we'll build you a temple and just sit there, we'll come and talk to you. Many of the Nords literally did that. They went, okay. When they made the connection with the Greys, okay, of course, when the consortium found out what was going on, they moved into the area as well. And the Nords were told, no, frankly, this idea of you pretending you're gods doesn't work well. You're not. I mean, you may like the thought, and you've certainly got a good thing going, but it's time to pull out. Hence why the Norse gods, like why the Greek gods, all of a sudden just faded into non-existence. They, quite frankly, left. But working with the Greys, they kept coming back in to keep an eye on things, and every now and again they'd make their presence known, which would help stabilize the economy. All of a sudden, you've got two kingdoms that are fighting, and a Norse god shows up and says, kids, knock it off. Well, you pretty quick settle down and stop the fighting. So, the Nords did come down, they did, and they still do, and pass on healing techniques, more natural than scientific. Like, we're not talking about giving them all kinds of technology and what have you. We're talking about teaching the outlanders, the people living out in the woods, how to deal with the natural herbs that were already growing here. And a lot of the Nords' early exploration was on the plant life and on the animal life of Earth, or as they call it, Sol 4. Okay, so they got here. Now, the Nords work in tandem with the Greys. So when the Greys are going around to pick people up, there's quite often, two or three Nords that are with them simply to help with the calming aspect, because although Nords are huge, many of them top the 7.5 foot mark. Okay, but they look human. Okay, by appearance, they look human, almost absolutely perfect health. A lot of that has to do with their own genetics for obvious reasons. They can't use somebody else's. But they keep their distance as far as not going in and going after great big piles of followers anymore. In all fairness, they didn't actually go looking for followers to start with. People just followed them and started worshiping them, and they went, okay. And they just never discouraged it. Okay, now they're not quite so visible. Although there are some people that have seen Nords and didn't necessarily recognize the fact they did. Because there are some Nords that wander around on this planet. And bear in mind, all huge Viking-looking people that are blonde are not necessarily off-world. Okay, so the Nords are a very amicable race. They are a monarchy. Okay, they do live on Mount Olympus. It's just not on Earth. Okay, it's the far side of the Pleiades star system. Okay, and quite frankly, since I'm not personally an astronomer, I couldn't tell you where that is in relation to Zeta Reticuli. Okay, but I can tell you they travel to both because they are in solid alliance with both the Pleiadians and the Nordics, and the Greys. Okay, and they have good relations with a lot of the people on Earth because they blend right in. They do that intentionally. Now, much as they are stronger, unlike some races, they won't hurt you by reaching out and shaking your hand. They've got a lot better control over that. Okay, now, like I said, they are run by a monarchy, and yes, they are, for lack of a better way of putting it, essentially, well, they're not immortal, but since they live for thousands of years as far as Earth goes, most humans see them as being immortal. Let's face it, if a human lives over 110, they're considered absolutely ancient. These guys on a bad day will live a couple 3,000 years. And that's the young ones. But they do die. Okay, they are not immortal, they just have a very long lifespan, and because their healing rate and their health is so far above human, primarily because of their own understanding the of herbalism, of natural healing techniques, they tend to live longer than what humans do. Humans do have the capacity to correct their own healing, to do that. And this is one of the things that the Nords were trying to teach people. Okay, when you start looking at the famous witch hunts, a lot of the times you can find either the Nords themselves had a hand in creating the problem, quite by accident, by simply showing some of the outlanders, some of the people that live out away from major communities, the healing techniques. And then, of course, mankind got a little sketchy, and all of a sudden we end up with the witch hunts. Okay, so the Nords have been around for a while. They're not planning on going anywhere anytime soon, and they are certainly not interested in taking over the planet or the government for that matter. Okay, so when you take a look at that, they are for the most part, they are a peaceful race. However, if they end up in war, you can bet that they do not fight with the idea of, oh, I have to be nice. A lot of the time, they fight more like berserkers. In other words, they go right off the deep end and they kill whatever's in their way. Okay, but understand, they are very creative, very tied to the natural world, as in they're interested very much in the handicrafts, in the leatherwork, woodworking. They take great pride in anything built. Okay. Now, this is a race that they don't come here to create a problem. They come here to see how mankind is evolving. And that's why the Nords themselves are not exactly known for abductions. They are known much more for simply being around the Greys to help stabilize things, to help people calm down when they're picked up by the Greys. Okay, the Nords themselves will quite happily sit down and not necessarily announce who they are. Okay, they may give you a name that is theirs or isn't, it depends. And they may just sit down and have a beer. Okay, what humans call beer is very mild as far as what the Nords call beer. Okay, Nords actually, in all fairness, drink ale, but a lot stronger than what you might think. Okay, but that said, they have been around for quite some time and they're not showing any signs of going anywhere. Are they in? Do they work independently with human governments? No. All of that interaction, from everything I've come to understand, all of that is set up by others. They will follow the guidelines that are laid out. but they have a great deal of respect for the what's the word I'm looking for here? I'm tripping over it. That's okay. For the chain of command. There we go. And remember, we call this a live recording because when we're done, we don't go back and edit any of it. You get what we are. So if I end up dropping this later, well, that's the way that goes. The Nords do not set up contracts with any of the governments or with any private corporations. If the consortium sets something up, they will let the Nords know, and the Nords will just simply follow in line because that's the chain of command. Okay. Now, I do have a lot more information on them. Okay. Amongst other races. I've only just gotten started on some of the races. But if you've got questions either about a race that we've already talked about or about a race that is that you may have run into. Now, I may not know them by the same name you do, but I do want to clear one thing up. There is a race of tall blondes that everybody calls the tall whites. The tall whites are not the Nords, and I'll get to the tall whites in another video. The Nords themselves are very much their own people. Okay, and they are still around. In all fairness, some of the ones still around, some of the ones that are still here were here way back when the Vikings were here, which might give you an idea of their age. Okay, so when a law is laid out by the consortium, the Nords will follow it. Okay, they themselves do not deal with the political side of getting involved with other races. They simply work inside guidelines that are laid out. Now, that said, well, we could probably go on and on this, but we are trying to keep these down to somewhere between the 20-minute, half-hour mark. There's a lot more information, not the least of which is the Nords, much as they are very adept at the natural side of things, their primary mode of transportation is, quite frankly, via, well, we'll call them horses, okay? The Nords on Earth would ride horses, absolutely, but then they didn't have options. The animals that they ride are a lot more volatile. Okay, the horses that the actual Nords ride, the horses from their world, they look very similar to a modern horse, about the size of a Percheron or a large Clydesdale, if you will. For those of you that don't know what the horses are, okay, that's where where Google comes in. Pretty certain you know what a horse is, but the Nords horses have a bone plate that runs all the way from the top of their head, right between their ears, all the way down the length of their forehead, just to the bridge of the nose. Now, much like horses use their hooves for fighting, the thunderheads, which are what the Nords ride, are they have that bone plate on the forehead. They use that very effectively as a weapon. Okay, so I mean, we are talking about different animals. In a manner of speaking, they look very much like horses, behave very similar. They're just a lot more powerfully built. But we're going to take this, at this point, we're going to wrap this up and just remind you that, number one, if you like our video, absolutely give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel, okay, so that you can get the rest of the videos coming out. We try and get them out regularly, and we do have a lot more coming. If you've got questions, there's a list of contact areas below this one, like below the video, that will tell you all kinds of different ways of getting a hold of me. And something to keep in mind that I should have said at the beginning of the video is that for the last 5.5 years now, I've been on Spaced Out Radio on the internet. Okay. The first Friday of every month, starting at about 9 o'clock at night, running to about 11:30 Pacific time. Okay. So I'm on there regularly. If you've got questions, you can either meet me there. I'm sure that Dave, the owner of Spaced Out, would be happy to have you on board. Drop in there or drop me a line below. If you've got questions, absolutely drop a line and ask. Okay. Um, if you've got a race or a race that you're not aware of, I have documentation in my possession of, at this point, over 80 races, including their culture, including the way they are, the whole 9 yards, that I haven't covered here. But the Nords are a friendly people. They are not here to create a problem. So we're going to leave that at this. And until we talk again, please take care of yourselves and each other. And for pity's sakes, stay positive.